This is The Silent Bloom, a psychological crime story about memories that deceive and love that destroys. In a city where secrets bloom louder than truth, one broken mind may hold the key to a perfect murder. Episode 1. The Girl with the Glass Shard. The Silent Bloom, Episode 1. The Girl with the Glass Shard. My name is Hazel Farrow. I grew up in a mansion with bulletproof windows, 2 Dobermans, and a father who thought emotions were tactical weaknesses. By 24, I had walked away from boardroom legacies and champagne galas to join a division no one respected, the Special Investigations Unit, where cases go to die or get buried. But this case, it clawed its way to me. They found her in an alley behind Magnolia Street, 2 blocks from the old church. She was barefoot, her dress stained red, and in her hand, held like a flower, was a broken shard of glass. Next to her, the body of a man, Victor Drew, 52, former private investigator, blood loss, no signs of struggle, no other suspects, just the girl, Emily Grant. I remember the first time I saw her. She sat in the interrogation room like something misplaced, like a child in the middle of a war. Pale skin, dull eyes. Her hands clutched her knees as if holding on to her last thread of safety. I stepped into the room and sat across from her. I didn't open the file. I didn't ask for her alibi. I just watched her breathe. Finally, I said, "Emily, do you remember what happened that night?" She looked up. "I was painting," she whispered. "Then, I wasn't. There was blood. It smelled like rust and glass. I think I was holding glass." Her voice cracked, but her face was calm, almost content, and that's what frightened me most. I visited the scene the next morning. Blood still soaked the cracks in the concrete. There was no sign of a struggle, no dragged footprints, no broken fence, just silence, and a painting. It was lying a few feet away from where Emily had been found, framed, shattered, the glass missing a single piece. Inside the frame, sunflowers, 27 of them, each one hand-painted with delicate golden petals and dark brown hearts. 27. That number followed us back to her apartment. Emily lived with her older sister, Diana, a polished woman with expensive taste and eyes that never blinked too long. She told us Emily had been mentally unstable for years, that she was getting better, that she just needed rest. But her voice was rehearsed, her compassion mechanical, while Thomas Keene, my partner, distracted her with polite questions. I wandered through the flat. In the guest room, I found another painting. Sunflowers again, same number, 27. This time, each flower had a single blood-red petal. Back at headquarters, we opened her therapy records. For the past year, Emily had been under private treatment by someone named Dr. Rebecca Hale. Name rang a bell. Wife of Richard Hale, tech mogul, media darling. But more than that, Rebecca was a neurolinguistic therapist specializing in memory regression. Fringe stuff, borderline illegal in most states. Her sessions with Emily were sealed, confidential. I didn't need the files. I had the paintings, each one more vivid than the last, each one hiding something in plain sight. And in the bottom right corner of one canvas, so small it could have been missed, a signature. A single letter. Our Emily's trial was set to begin in 2 weeks. She said she didn't remember, but her paintings did, and so did the number, 27. Not the number of years she'd lived, not the number of days since her last therapy session. It was something else. A countdown, maybe? Or a code? Or worse? A promise? I don't know why she smiled when she said she didn't remember. But I know this. People don't paint flowers over blood unless they're trying to bury something beautiful, in something unforgivable. And Emily Grant's bloom wasn't finished yet. Episode 2, The Whisper Protocol. Everyone thinks murder starts with rage. Sometimes, though, it starts with silence. And in Emily Grant's case, it started with a voice no one else could hear. We began with the paintings, dozens of them, stored in her apartment, her therapy files, even tucked behind cabinet doors like forgotten secrets. They weren't just art, they were instructions. The number 27 appeared in nearly all of them. 27 petals, 27 rooftops, 27 windows glowing in a city skyline. Each image told a story, but not Emily's, someone else's. I met with her therapist the next day. Dr. Rebecca Hale greeted us with perfect hair and clinical detachment. Her office smelled like fresh linen and antiseptic lies. Emily is a vulnerable girl, she said. She creates worlds to survive. It's not uncommon in dissociative patients. I asked her if she believed Emily could have killed someone. She hesitated. Not alone. That was the first honest thing she said. Thomas Keene dug into Dr. Hale's background. Before marrying tech billionaire Richard Hale, she'd studied experimental neurolinguistic programming in Switzerland. One paper stood out. Mnemonic reversion, reinforcing emotional anchors through subconscious recall. It was banned 2 years later. Too powerful, too risky, too easy to misuse. But the kicker? The method was codenamed Whisper Protocol. We weren't chasing a murder. We were chasing a reprogramming. Later that night, I returned to Emily's apartment alone. I needed to see the bedroom again, the space where she painted. The walls were covered in faint charcoal sketches, overlapping, faded. I turned off the lights, and under the black light I brought with me, the room came alive. Hundreds of petals swirling across the ceiling, words etched in invisible ink across the wall. He said he'd marry me in the spring. When I turned 27, I sat down on her bed. I imagined Emily, night after night, tracing shapes into the dark, whispering to herself, painting her dreams into corners. And then I saw the photograph, tucked behind a painting. Two people, arms wrapped around each other, their faces cropped off. But on the back of the photo, written in sharp black ink, was a date, April 17th, 2011. The year Emily would have turned 27. We brought the photo to Diana Grant. Her reaction was immediate. "That's not Emily's writing," she snapped. "And that man, whoever he is, he never existed. My sister made him up." But her hands were shaking, and I noticed something strange on the coffee table behind her, a glass jar filled with sunflower seeds. I reached in, pulled one out. Each seed had a single red dot painted on its shell. She slammed the jar shut and told me to leave. I did, but not before taking a picture of the jar, not before noticing the label on its bottom. Therapeutic Focus Object. Property of R. Hale, MD back at HQ. Thomas had more news. Victor Drew, the man Emily allegedly killed, had been hired 3 months earlier by a private client to investigate an affair. And the subject of that affair? Richard Hale. "So let me get this straight," I whispered. Richard Hale was cheating. Rebecca Hale found out. Emily was the mistress. Diana, the sister, knew and stayed quiet. Rebecca reprogrammed Emily, killed Victor, then erased the trail. Thomas nodded. Classic misdirection. Use a mentally unstable girl as the scapegoat and bury the real motive under layers of therapy and delusion. The only question now was, what else did Emily know that someone made her forget? The brain is a fragile thing. Memories can be rewritten, truth can be repainted. But sometimes, a single cracked petal is enough to make the whole bloom fall apart. Episode 3. The Petals. She painted. Some people speak in words, some scream in silence, and some paint. Emily Grant was the third kind. The day we searched her old art therapy records, I didn't expect answers. What I found was a map, painted in pieces, laced in metaphor. The hospital kept everything. Sketchbooks stacked in faded cardboard boxes, labeled by date. Each year the colors shifted. The early sketches, gray, smeared, jagged, looked like storms trapped in paper. But something changed halfway through year 4. A new subject appeared. A man. Always the same silhouette, broad shoulders, tilted chin, and the same pose, reaching for her. He never had a face, but he always wore a watch on his left wrist. And in nearly every image, the time read 4:17. I took out my phone and checked the photograph we'd found earlier. April 17th, the same date, not a coincidence, a memory. Or maybe a promise. Dr. Hale claimed Emily made it all up, a convenient story for a girl lost in her own mind. But I knew denial when I saw it, and I'd seen enough predators to know when someone was painting from life. That evening, I went back to see Emily. She was in her cell at the medical wing, head resting against the wall, eyes unfocused, hands moving like she was painting something in the air. I sat down on the other side of the glass. She didn't look at me. I spoke gently. "Emily, tell me about the man in your paintings." Silence. Then, "He smells like cedar and rain," she said. "He used to read to me. Shakespeare. Only the sad ones." "Did he love you?" I asked. A pause. "He said he did. But he only touched me in the dark." My throat tightened. "Emily, what happened on April 17th? Her fingers drew invisible petals against the glass. That's when he stopped saying my name. Thomas was waiting in the hallway when I left. He looked pale. "Hazel, we just pulled Victor Drew's client list from a recovered hard drive. And he wasn't investigating Richard Hale." "Then who?" "Rebecca." Silence dropped like a curtain. Rebecca Hale had hired a private investigator to follow her own husband. But why? Because she didn't trust him? Because she knew? Or because she was already planning something darker? "There's more," Thomas said. Diana Grant, Emily's sister, was listed as an anonymous source. She tipped Victor off about Emily's secret relationship 2 years ago. "So Diana knew?" I asked. "Knew and said nothing, until she said everything." He nodded. She played both sides, protected her sister and the man funding her lifestyle. "Which means," I whispered, "she also had motive." Back at headquarters, I pinned the paintings on the wall in order, chronological, story-like. It wasn't just a progression of trauma. It was a timeline of seduction, betrayal, and abandonment. And right in the center, a single sunflower. This one was different. Only 10 petals. 9 painted in yellow. The 10th, smeared red. I called Dr. Alice Marlowe, a forensic psychologist I trusted more than most. She studied the sketches via video. Her voice was calm but tight. "These aren't delusions, Hazel. They're records. And that red petal?" She zoomed in. "Look closely. There's a number, hidden in the curve." I squinted, and there it was. Room 417. Emily wasn't lost. She was leading us. We just hadn't been listening. Truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it's whispered through paint and petals and silence. And when it finally speaks, you better be ready to believe it. Episode 4, The Room That Doesn't Exist. Most people believe rooms don't lie, but that's only true for rooms that were meant to be found. Room 417. The number appeared in Emily's sketches over a dozen times, hidden in petals, reflections, even the folds of clothing in her portraits. It wasn't coincidence. It was a destination. I traced the address. A boutique hotel on the east edge of the city, the kind that offered discretion with your room key. Elegant lobby. No cameras past reception. I booked under a fake name. No badge. No backup. Just instinct. and a blacklight in my coat pocket. The receptionist smiled too much, said the hotel only had 3 floors. I nodded, played dumb, then waited until midnight. Sound shift, footsteps on marble, quiet keycard beep, elevator door creaks open. The elevator panel had no button for a 4th floor, but I'd seen it in the building permits. I pressed 3, then slipped the emergency keycard into the override slot and held both side buttons. The elevator groaned, then rose 1 more level, unofficial, unlisted, unwelcoming. The 4th floor was dark, not abandoned, just forgotten. Wallpaper peeled like old skin. Light flickered. Silence felt aware. I walked slowly. Room numbers were mismatched, scratched out, rewritten in pen. But near the end of the hallway, there it was. Room 417. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a whisper. Inside, it smelled like dust and cheap perfume. And something else. Cedar. Rain. There were no sheets on the bed, no toothbrush in the bathroom. But on the far wall, painted over and still faintly visible, was a sunflower. 10 petals, 1 red, and scrawled beneath it, barely legible in black marker, I waited here. He never came. I turned on my black light. The room lit up like a confession. Footprints, smudges, a name written again and again on the floor, across the closet door, on the ceiling. Richard. The drawer beside the bed had no Bible. Instead, a folded napkin from a rooftop bar I knew well, and scribbled on it in looping cursive. You said April, I said always. You said silence, I said forever. It was signed. E. There was no question now. Emily had been here. She had waited. She had loved. And she had been left. But who brought her back? Who wiped this room from record? Scene shift. Back to precinct. Early morning, Thomas met me in the office. Coffee in one hand, resignation in the other. The building's security files were erased last spring. The room doesn't exist in the official layout. It was converted into private storage last month. Convenient, I muttered. Oh, and Hazel, he added. The hotel's biggest private donor? Don't say it. Rebecca Hale's foundation. It was all coming together. The ghost room, the erased memories, the faceless paintings. This wasn't just manipulation. This was architecture. Someone had built a world where Emily was never meant to remember, never meant to speak, never meant to survive the truth. But she did remember. She painted the room. She painted Richard's name. She painted the lie. And now, we were standing inside it. Some rooms are never listed. Some names never spoken. But the body remembers. And the truth? It paints itself. Eventually, Episode 5. The Sisters' Silence. Some truths don't need words. They sit in the silence, coiled, waiting. And when they finally come out, they don't ask for permission. Diana Grant wasn't the villain in any official report. On paper, she was perfect. Legal guardian, sole caretaker, devoted sister. She dressed like power, spoke like a publicist, and cried like a woman who rehearsed it the night before. But the thing about silence, you can only choreograph it for so long. I invited her to the precinct. No threats, no warrant, just a chair, a closed door, and the truth spread across the table. Paintings, photographs, room 417. Her fingers twitched when she saw that number. I don't know what you think you found, she said, but my sister is sick. She imagines things. Sick girls don't describe rooms that don't exist, I replied, or draw the same man over and over with the same watch and same promises. She didn't answer. Emily wasn't hallucinating. She was remembering. And every time she painted, she screamed the truth into a silence you built around her. Diana's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. Not yet. I placed the photograph from room 417 in front of her, the one of the couple. Cropped faces. Who took this picture? I asked. Silence. Who brought Emily home that night after Richard left her alone in that room? Her jaw clenched. I leaned in. Who cleaned the sheets, Diana? Who wiped her memories clean, then told her none of it ever happened? She looked up at me then, eyes wide, shiny, and empty. She was happy, Diana said softly. For once in her life, she was glowing, laughing. She said he made her feel real. So, you let it happen? I asked. You let a grown man sleep with your sister with the mental age of 16, because she was happy? Diana flinched, then straightened. She would have broken without him. And what about you? I asked. Did you break when he left her? No. Her voice was sharp now. I broke when she started talking about marriage, about going public, about becoming Mrs. Hale. That was it. Not the affair, not the betrayal, the threat, the risk of exposure, the possibility that Emily, the fragile little sister, might actually win. Love, money, legacy, everything Diana never had. So you made a choice, I said. You went to Rebecca, told her everything. She looked away. I didn't know what she'd do, Diana whispered. You didn't ask. The silence now was heavier, not rehearsed, not controlled. It leaked from the corners of her mouth and eyes. She was drowning in it. I placed Emily's final sketch in front of her, a girl in a white dress, standing alone in a hallway of sunflowers, each flower turned away from her, and in the girl's hand, a paintbrush dipped in red. She loved you, you know, I said. She painted you as the sun. I was her son, Diana choked, but I got tired of burning. We didn't arrest her, not yet. We didn't have enough to charge, but she cracked, and now she was bleeding, and blood always leaves a trail. That night, I sat in my car and listened to Emily's tape again, her voice faint and distant. When he touched my hair, I thought it was God. When she told me to forget, I thought it was mercy. But when I woke up and the petals were gone, I knew I'd been replaced. Sisters are supposed to protect, but protection isn't always kindness, and silence isn't always safety. Sometimes it's a weapon. Episode 6. The Bloomburns people think truth arrives like thunder, but in my experience, it comes quietly, in the color of ash, in the curl of a burning petal. The morning we brought in Rebecca Hale, she didn't ask why. She just fixed her lipstick, straightened her collar, and smiled. Did she tell you I forced her? She asked, sitting across from me. Emily lies beautifully, doesn't she? It's the illness, warps everything, makes monsters out of mothers. I slid the photograph across the table, the painting from room 417, the blacklight scans, the name Richard scrawled across every surface. Her hand trembled, but her voice didn't. You think I did this? She whispered. Because I wouldn't let my husband burn our lives down for a girl with a damaged mind? No, I said. I think you did this because he already had. She exhaled, like someone letting go of a long, cold breath. Do you know what it's like, she said, to marry a man with a hero complex? To watch him fall for every broken thing in his path? He said she needed saving. He said it was temporary. He said, I'd understand. She leaned back. So I made him understand. I ended it. By drugging her, I asked, erasing memories, inventing new ones? She shrugged. They were kinder than the truth. You didn't do it for her, I said. You did it for him, so he wouldn't leave, so he could wake up next to you and forget the girl with the paintings and the dreams. And it worked, she smiled, until that damn investigator, until Victor Drew dug up the room. So you silenced him too, I said. She didn't reply, but she didn't deny it. Scene shift, prison medical ward, Emily's final session with Hazel. I sat with Emily one last time. She was painting again, a canvas balanced on her knees, hands stained with color. I asked what she was drawing. "A garden," she said, "but it's on fire." "Why?" "Because I planted the wrong seeds." I told her the truth. About Rebecca, about Diana, about Richard. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just looked at her canvas. "I knew it," she whispered, "but I didn't want to paint that ending." I asked if she remembered room 417 now. She nodded. "I remember everything." "Will you testify?" I asked. She looked up. "Does it matter?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. We left the room in silence. Behind me, she dipped her brush in red and painted a single sunflower, bent and burning. Final scene. Hazel's closing reflection, quiet, poetic, slow fade. They say healing takes time, but for some, it takes truth. And truth doesn't bloom. It burns. Emily Grant never got her wedding, never wore the white dress she sketched 1,000 times, but she remembered. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for walking this path with us, through memory, silence, and the fire beneath the bloom. Emily's story may have ended here, but the echoes remain. In the petals we forget, in the lies we protect, and in the truths we bury, until they burn their way back to light. This has been The Silent Bloom. If the story moved you, share it, review it, keep it alive, because the mind may forget, but the heart always remembers. Don't forget to subscribe for more dark mysteries. See you in the next case.